Right now, Indonesia is in talks with China to renegotiate the debt related to Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway project. This is the first bullet train project in Southeast Asia, and it is the project under China's Belt and Road Initiative, which basically aims to improve global trade routes and infrastructure. But the issue is that the project has run into financial problems. The revenue has not matched the original expectations. Because of this, Indonesia is now trying to restructure the loan terms with China, simply meaning that they are asking for things like more time to repay and changes in the interest conditions. And this situation brings up a bigger recurring discussion that we have seen with several countries, which is of course the debate around China's so-called debt trap policy. In simple terms, it just means that China gives large loans to other countries for big infrastructure projects like railways, highways, and ports. These projects are often expensive, and sometimes countries that borrow the money struggle to pay the loans back. Critics say that China knows these countries might have trouble repaying, and once they are in debt, China can use the situation to gain political and economic influence. Basically, the borrowing country ends up depending on China, and that gives China leverage in negotiations, trade, and even access to strategic locations. To understand why this debate is so active today, look at the numbers. This year alone, developing countries are expected to pay around $35 billion back to China. And here is the striking part. More than $20 billion of that amount is coming from the world's poorest countries. But this is not just about numbers on paper. We can actually see how this plays out in case of many countries of the world. Take Sri Lanka for instance. Over the years, Sri Lanka borrowed around $12 billion from China for various infrastructure projects. But when Sri Lanka struggled to pay the debt, something major happened. It had to lease the Hambantota port to the Chinese companies for 99 years. And this example is brought up as a classic case in the debt trap discussion. There are other countries like Cambodia, Mongolia, which also have significant debt owed to China. Their growing repayment pressure has raised similar concerns about how much influence China might gain in their economic and political decisions. And we definitely can't ignore the very well-known China-Pakistan economic corridor. China promised that massive infrastructure investments would help boost Pakistan's economy. But even after spending around $45 billion in the project, Pakistan is still struggling with economic instability and has not seen the level of growth that was initially expected. On top of that, many countries in Africa, Latin America are also carrying large debts which they have to repay to China. And the question arises, if so many countries have already seen that how China operates, giving big loans, gaining influence, and sometimes even taking control of strategic assets, so why do these countries keep borrowing from China? Well, there are three big reasons. First, China offers money fast with fewer conditions. Many foreign lenders and global institutions like the World Bank or IMF usually come with strict rules. They often ask for governance reforms, transparency checks, and policy changes before giving out loans, which can take years. China, on the other hand, moves faster. It offers loans with fewer political conditions and starts projects quickly. For developing countries that urgently need roads, railways, ports, and power plants, that kind of speed with which loans are given is very appealing. The second reason is that these projects promise development and growth. Countries take these loans because they finance these big infrastructure projects like highways, rail networks, industrial corridors, and these countries believe that these will boost the economy in the long run. Even if the risks are high, they think that the political rewards of bringing so much of growth will also be high. So leaders take the gamble, hoping that these projects will bring jobs, investments, tourism, and modernization. Now, before we move to the third point, it's important to know that this aspect is not always visible on the surface, but it is often the real undercurrent influencing how these deals are made. The third point is then related to the lack of transparency in agreements, and these benefit the corrupt politicians and officials and not the public. Many of these deals are negotiated directly between government leaders and Chinese companies with very little public oversight. This lack of transparency often makes these agreements even more appealing to corrupt political leaders and officials. When the terms are not publicly disclosed, it becomes easier for the decision makers to push projects forward without scrutiny or accountability. In such situations, the negotiation process can lean in favor of personal or political gains rather than public interest. So the problem is that while short-term benefits and prestige of launching a major project may go to those in power, the long-term financial burden ultimately falls on the country and its citizens. So the real cost is carried by the people, not by the individuals who approved the deal. Now, whenever this debt trap theory is raised, China strongly rejects it. China argues that its intention is not to trap countries in debt, but to support development, especially in nations that need infrastructural development but lack financing options. According to China, the goal is to build railways, ports, and highways so that these countries can grow economically. However, critics point that while these projects are meant to promote development, they often end up in creating a situation of dependence, and once a country becomes financially dependent, China can potentially use that leverage to influence political decisions and gain strategic advantages on the global stage. But there is another side to this conversation as well. Not all responsibility lies on China alone. In many cases, after loans are approved, the execution and management of these projects fall on the borrowing country. And here, the issues like poor planning, weak feasibility studies, mismanagement, and governance problems can lead to cost overruns and project failures. So even if the funding was provided, the infrastructure sometimes is not completed or run efficient. And when those projects underperform, the country struggles to generate revenue, which then makes it harder to repay the loans. So in a way, the problem becomes two-sided. On one side, China provides the loan and holds leverage. On the other side, borrowing country may mismanage the project, leading to financial strain. And when the repayment becomes difficult, the country ends up negotiating again with China, which is how the situation eventually resembles like a debt trap. That's it in this video. So what do you think? Are these loans a genuine path towards development, or do they end up creating long-term dependence? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. And thank you so much for watching the video. Like, share and subscribe for more easy explainer videos like this.